Welcome to Herd Mentality, a podcast where we discuss how the power of audio moves minds and markets. I'm Brittney Rigby, Managing Editor at Little Black Book, and each episode I sit down with creative thinkers, marketers, and makers to explore how the world's most creative brands use audio to make people think, feel, and act. Today, we're exploring the art of audio production, how it's made, where to start, and what it takes to create a sound that defines your brand. First, I'm joined by Aaron Matthews from Original Audio and Laura-Leigh Smith from Studiotonic to unpack the craft of sound. A little later, we hear from Kimberley Flanagan at Strat Agency on how Chemist Warehouse is bringing the power of sonic brand assets to life. I'm going to get stuck in with you first, Aaron, and it's as simple and as hard of a question as where do you start? Where do you start when it comes to figuring out what a brand should sound like? Is it the business problem? Is it the rest of the brand identity? Is it what you're trying to make someone feel? How do you get started?
I think it's about making someone feel something, right? That's the thing. That's the great thing about audio. It's that emotion and that connection, and it does way more than the kind of, you know, the visual logo and the Pantone color and the font and all that kind of stuff. It's about what's that kind of brand DNA and how do we elicit that in sound and audio and make it emotive. I think that's where we always start when we're looking at audio branding, and just delving into kind of a brand's DNA really, and going, you know, what is your personality? What's your voice? You know, taking that kind of tone of voice out of the visual brand guidelines and converting that into sound and audio. And that's a number of different things. That's sonic logos, that's music composition, that's voiceover usage, that's, you know, this whole suite of audio that usually for most brands actually doesn't get an airing and doesn't get utilized in the way that it should.
Does a brand usually know what its tone of voice is and how it wants to make someone feel when they come to you? Or is it, maybe it's this, but maybe we haven't thought about it specifically for audio?
I think it's that. I think it's a bit, we've written it down in the
it lives in a document.
In the document somewhere that we've hidden away on a PDF and it's on someone's desktop. We haven't thought about what that means when it's spoken out loud or heard out loud. I think that's what we have to kind of get out of brands, is that, you know, what is the feeling, what's the personality, what do you want to the emotion that you want to elicit when someone hears your brand. That's the stuff that's missing. I think that's the bit that, you know, like I said, gets stuck in the kind of visual guidelines and doesn't really get any further. And that's the bit that we really have fun with. It's, you know, having sessions with, you know, everyone that's involved in the brand and kind of getting that out of them and trying to get the brand DNA out of them really, and understand, you know, how it should sound.
That sounds like a lovely job, because a brand should be like a living, breathing, evolving organism and thing, and figuring out how you sound to the world is a fun challenge. How do you explain to a brand the impact it has when you hear a brand or interact with it through audio versus just seeing it? How do you start to explain the impact of that?
I think there's a couple of things that we do. The first thing is there's some great research around this, first of all. There's a great study in 2020 from Ipsos, which talks about the power of sound and, you know, how sonic assets are, you know, way more better at things like brand recall, for instance. You know, and again, recently the TikTok study that came out with System 1, where it showed brand assets within the first 2 seconds, and audio came out on top, above and beyond things like visual brand guidelines and such like. That's the first bit that we start with, is actually, you know, there's some really good research behind this, first of all. And also just the second bit is that, you know, we go around humming this stuff, you know, in our heads, you know, Insurance Solve with Budget Direct, all of these sonic brands Classic. that live in our mind, right? You know, that's the power of this stuff. It's like no one looks at a font or a logo or a Pantone color and then goes away that day and then thinks about that. What they do is they whistle sonic logos in their head, like the McDonald's jingle or whatever it might be. So that's where the power of it is. And I think trying to get brands to understand that and marketers to understand that is quite tough in a way. You know, sometimes it's like, there's some real power in this, guys. You know, we're all living it and breathing it every day and hearing them, use them,
Yeah. And to your point, Aaron, sound kind of bypasses the brain logic. It goes straight to the emotion, and it's something that is present. Someone can walk down the street and they can ignore a visual logo, but once you hear something, you can't unhear that. That's something that, as you said, audio is the fastest recall trigger for someone, much more than any visual cue. And it's also surrounding you and your airspace all day, every day. You're not necessarily looking at something. You're driving in the car, you're cooking, you're doom scrolling, like it happens to the best of us, but you're always listening and remembering that. And that's sort of how it's the best sort of storytelling tool that allows you to really trust that brand. And that's what we're trying to get marketers and creatives to really understand, that this is the best tool you can possibly use, just as important as the visual.
And when we know that building a brand is an exercise in building memory structures and building feeling and having feeling convert into action, I mean, it's undeniable that the things you remember are the weird songs that you learned when you were a kid, or the jingles that dominated your childhood. Like,
absolutely,
I could sing every ad from the 90s, and in fact still do.
Oh yeah.
And it's one of those things.
It's a fun party trick, everyone loves it on a Saturday night.
Or
like, do you remember the Lubomobile ad? Call 133032. Like, absolutely I do.
The Pizza Hut one as well.
The Pizza Hut one. The reading writing hotline.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. The
13, is that one?
Yeah, 1300 6555
06.
06. Yeah, it's 06, not 46. But yes, exactly that.
Yeah. Even I was just telling Aaron, I've been living and working in London the last 6 years, and my partner and I have just moved back this year. And it's fascinating now listening to all these classic Australian jingles again. And they're so nostalgic, and they just come rushing back to you like muscle memory. I'm driving in the car and I'm hearing Bunnings Warehouse, lowest prices are just the beginning. And I'm like, well, I know what I'm doing this Saturday. I'm going to get a sausage sizzle at Bunnings. It's like, wow. It's just, they really, really retain in your brain.
That's so interesting, the effect of being out of the market for a chunk of time and then coming back and being like, oh yeah, this is what I've missed, but it's all still there.
It's all still there.
It's like riding a bike.
It is. Yep.
Laura-Leigh, I wonder if there's something for you that always cuts through. Is it humor, a certain type of sound, a certain feeling? How do you figure out what ingredient or ingredients will be right for that brand?
Yeah. For me, 100% I feel emotion is the core and key ingredient, because above all else, you can have a really clever production value, you can have a catchy hook, and don't get me wrong, those things are really important. But if what you're hearing doesn't make you feel something, it's just not going to stick. And there are many ways in which you can, and brands can, bring emotion into their sonic branding through techniques like humor, like nostalgia, warmth, tension, all sorts of things. Even the Netflix dun dun, it's anxiety inducing, but it also makes you think, I am super excited. I'm about to be really entertained by something awesome here. Another example I love, which I feel like uses the perfect marriage of humor and tension in sort of building emotion in someone. And the reason why I say it builds emotion, because every time I hear it, I just crack up laughing, is super cheap butter, much, much more. It's just so hilarious. And it's literally screaming at you to buy motor products. And you just think, wow, that's short, sharp, snappy, effective, and it works. And then the very other end of the spectrum is something like the brilliance of the Qantas campaign, I Still Call Australia Home. That is, you feel so emotional, you feel heartwarmed when you hear that. And they very cleverly latched on to the 80s song by Peter Allen, which is all about national pride. It's all of those nostalgic feelings. And Qantas, now having connected its brand to that track, is very much now known in Australia as Australia's national airline, and that, I think, every great bit of sonic branding, yes, it stays in your head, but more importantly, it stays in your heart.
And even you mentioning some of those examples, it speaks to brand building's job not to just convert current demand, but to create future demand, because I don't know if I need to go to Super Cheap Auto right now.
No.
But if something happened to my car and I
Yes.
thought, where do I go?
Yeah.
That jingle's popping into my head.
Mine is if I ever need tiles, I'm going to go to National Tiles.
Yes,
totally.
Frank Walker. Hello.
That
I'm gonna
man.
be
Yeah,
there.
hello.
His voice is burned into my brain.
And the great thing about that is that, not a sonic logo really, probably not really that intentional, but has become so iconic. It's kind of sort of created this sort of world within itself that it's so iconic and so well known that it's just brilliant. It's it's like whenever I think about a tile place, it's National Tiles, of course.
Of course it is, yeah. And they, without even realizing it, have subconsciously built brand equity, right? They have actually brought this sonic branding as so intrinsic to their DNA that without even having to try that hard, other than being bold enough to repeat it for years on end, that is such a clever strategy.
And that is the other bit of sonic branding is consistency,
100%.
consistent use of it, because there's so many brands that will develop a sonic brand and then not use it consistently everywhere, forget about it, maybe use it on some things, not others. McDonald's is a great example of this. Obviously, every single place that you see and hear a McDonald's ad, you hear the sonic logo in some form or the other. And I think that's the power of it as well, is that you have to be consistent with it.
Do you feel like you have to convince clients about consistency and frequency? It feels like creatively there's such a conversation about wear out, and we know logically and scientifically that wear out happens much less than we think it does.
Yeah.
Is that why people create a thing, invest in a thing, and then ditch a thing because they're scared about people getting sick of it or bored of it? Why do people ditch stuff?
I think so. I think that's indicative of marketers generally, is that we get bored of stuff quite quickly and then move on to the next thing. If you think about campaign length, there's never really any kind of consistency. Very few brands do that, very well. They're by the time they've moved on to the next thing and then the next thing, and just as everyone else is getting used to it and the general public are getting used to it, the marketers are doing the next thing. So I think there is definitely a disconnect between, but certainly with things like sonic branding and audio branding, the use of consistency. You have to do it, and you have to do it all the time in every single place that you show up.
Are you observing trends? Is there a moment in time? It feels like, for instance, if I think back to COVID, there was that real long run of earnest, we're here for you style of advertising. Then we moved past that and funny came back. Right now, are you seeing any through lines or trends in what clients want in terms of how they sound?
Probably not. I think in terms of trends, I think one of the things that seems to be coming up at the moment is I feel like the jingles coming back.
Yes.
Like, Maybelline did something where they brought the 90s Maybelline jingle back from the 90s quite recently on TikTok. That was, I think, in 2024. Which spurred this whole kind of, world on TikTok of people that hadn't seen it before that were then remixing it. I feel like the kind of, sonic logos that are maybe just the kind of melody and the notes are kind of maybe moving aside for sung jingles again. I feel like the jingle might be coming back for 2026.
Yep.
I feel like
the jingle is not dead.
Yeah, totally.
I want a new batch of jingles to
Yes.
sing and annoy my husband with.
Don't we
so
all?
that sounds brilliant. If I think about sonic work from Menulog or Macca's or Bingley or Bunnings, to your point, Laura-Leigh, I think about stuff that's part of culture. It doesn't feel like an ad. It feels like part of my childhood or part of my commute or part of my wind down time. How do you set up a brand so that those sonic assets can work hard enough for it to become culturally relevant, not just relevant in a campaign?
I think it's important for marketers and creatives to not think of it as a per campaign mindset. They need to think of sonic branding as an upfront brand strategy system almost that they're committing to with that consistency. And what we do when we're given a brief to create a piece of sonic branding, we, after the strategy and working out what their personality is, what they stand for, and defining that tone, that sound world, we're essentially creating them a suite, like a sonic toolkit, if you will. And that has a huge amount of assets. It's different music tracks, it's sound design, it's voiceover, it's all these elements that marry together, and almost like an album. They're different, but they flow, and they have a common thread throughout everything. And that gives brands the flexibility to use their sonic identity across so many different platforms. You know, it can work on a short, sharp TikTok ad all the way up to a Super Bowl commercial. And that is how marketers can intrinsically pepper their sonic identity throughout culture. I was fortunate enough to work with the team who composed the menu log jingle, and my dear friend Adam Smythe over in London was one of the brilliant writers on that, who wrote, "Did somebody say menu log?" And whoa, did that really take off? You know, that was just, and kudos as well to McCann, the creative agency in London, who from the very outset just said, we are going to really hone in on a brand strategy here. What are we going to do? How are we going to execute it? And they had the success of the Snoop Dogg campaign. And I think even along the way after that campaign, you know, we then got a brief to sort of redivert the audio to something else. And we're all in the office going, what? No way. Like this, they have to keep going with this. They're missing a trick if they don't. And someone thankfully high up, it's called Just Eat over in the UK.
Yeah.
They thankfully were like, you know what, we're going to continue. We're going to make this consistent. And they went on to do it with Katy Perry and Christina Aguilera, and recently Craig David. And I was also asked to cast a classical vocal ensemble over there as part of the UCL Champions League football event. And we recorded the menu log jingle in 20 different European languages. And that, again, is such an amazing way for marketers to, you know, make their brand be part of culture, because you're now opening up such another amazing market, being part of that event. And it can naturally evolve. And again, as part of this toolkit, it's really important that we as the composers and producers are allowing our clients to evolve, for their sonic branding to transcend over decades and suit any different genre, and we're not just creating one little 3-second logo. We're creating a whole suite of assets so that they can stay relevant and they can stay consistent for years and years to come.
I love how you referred to it as an album. That feels like it kind of captures it.
Yeah.
And that menu log jingle is iconic.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Who's doing it well, Aaron? And I might split that question slightly and ask for Aussie brands and global brands.
I think in Australia, I think Amasim, I think, are doing some good stuff with sonic branding. Not necessarily actually sonic logos, but just almost kind of spoken brand names, but sort of over a melody. It feels like a kind of almost a new version of how to do a jingle in a way. Maybe it's the kind of 2025 version of the jingle that Amasim are doing, but I think they're doing some really good work. Obviously, you know, people like Bunnings, obviously that's a great case of sonic branding, and you know the stuff that they did where they let was it Peking Duck, wasn't it, remix
Yes.
it and then do the rave in the Bunnings warehouse. That sort of took on a life of its own. And I think when a brand almost kind of lifts the reins a little bit and doesn't take that stuff too seriously and isn't that strict on it, I think that's where it can explode in terms of, you know, if you look at the Jet2 holiday stuff, for instance, you know,
Yes.
that's a great example of how, you know, that brand just
It went
just
viral,
nuts.
didn't it?
And obviously being from the UK, you know, but to your point earlier on is that, you know, if you were thinking of a holiday brand, you know, around the time that was happening, the chances are you're probably going to think about Jet2 holidays, right? Because it was everywhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think when a brand, I think Jet2 Holidays is a good example of a brand that that really let people go to town on that without reining it in. I think it worked.
You mentioned before as well brands picking up sounds or jingles that might have had a past life and feel nostalgic for millennials who are now on TikTok, but also reaching Gen Zs, Gen Alphas. The Bunnings jingle has kind of had a life of its own on socials, and you see people dressing up as Bunnings workers to go to music festivals in the hat and the apron and stuff, and then that little sting playing over the top of it, and that's cool again.
Yeah.
But I genuinely feel like those things are spurred on by the Sonic branding. I
Absolutely.
honestly don't think that if the Sonic branding didn't exist, I don't think that would happen on TikTok. I can't see it.
Totally.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Are the three of us brand ambassadors for Bunnings today? I feel like we've talked about this jingle a lot.
Get our dungarees on.
Yeah.
You mentioned sausage sizzle, and now I'm like, it's Monday. I have to wait a lot of days for it to be Saturday for that to be a possibility. How about you, Laura-Leigh? When you think about brands that are doing it well, which ones spring to mind?
Oh, good question. There are so many fabulous bits of Sonic branding out there. Let me think. I think, well, I'm a bit biased. There's one that comes to mind, and my mum's definitely very biased as well. When I was overseas, she would say, well, you're not here, but I can hear you on the television. I'm also a singer, and I'm the Flight Centre 3-note voice.
Are you?
Oh, wow.
Can you do it for us?
Embarrassing, guilty as charged.
You kept that quiet in the green room.
Just that little Flight Centre.
That's you.
I know.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
That's amazing.
But you know what? Because they used to have, when we're talking about the 90s and like childhood, they had one that was call Flight Centre, lowest airfare guarantee.
Yes.
Right? Which they then changed. And I remember when I was briefed to come in and sing that, I thought, wow, this is random, but that they have such a good jingle already, But then, for whatever reason, they pivoted, and this one's now been on air for almost 10 years or something. So it's, again, kudos to them for being super consistent in something so simple but really innovative. We gave them multiple options, I remember, on the day, but they'd already really honed in on the strategy of wanting the brand name, 3 notes, and that was it. And that's now what's stuck.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be able to watch a Flight Centre ad without thinking of you ever again. That's amazing.
I'm always amazed when I see a new TV ad come on that doesn't have Sonic branding on. I'm like, oh, that's a missed opportunity.
Totally.
And I find that quite a lot, is that, you have all these amazing ads and, that you spend a fortune on, and it's like, where's the Sonic branding?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it makes, if it's an integrated campaign, the radio component feel quite disconnected
100%.
from a hero TVC or from the out-of-home executions. If you're not establishing in a 30-second film enough branding, establishing distinctive brand assets that are then rolled out into other channels.
100%.
It's weird that people still, it's not that they don't know, but don't act on the fact that we know that every single one of those channels works harder.
But the example I give to that is that you would never use different logos and different colours and different fonts across different channels. Why would you use a different voiceover, different music, or a different Sonic? That doesn't make any sense to me. And I've made so many campaigns, pieces of creative for podcasting, that have a different brand voice than the TV ad or the cinema ad or a different piece of music. And brands, okay, yeah, that's fine. It's fine. Why would you not want it to sound the same? That's the first tick, is having, if you've got a recognisable brand voice, do a deal with them and use them everywhere. Don't use them in one place and then not somewhere else.
Does it mean, though, that the brands that are doing it well, or brands that are just getting started or thinking about how to build a Sonic brand identity, there is white space for brands that do it well and double down on it?
Yep.
And back consistency.
I always just whenever I talk to anyone about this, I'm just like, just think about this like your visual guidelines and how regimented you are in using those across different channels. Think about that exactly the same way you would for audio.
Why do you think it still doesn't happen, and why do you think there's still arguably an underinvestment in audio?
I don't know. I don't know if if I sometimes feel like, because audio, maybe from an agency point of view, feels a bit unsexy. You've done the really nice TV ad, you've done the cinema ad, you've done all the kind of, social media edits, everything. Everyone loves doing visual stuff because you can see it, and it's where the budget is. It's where the sexy stuff is, right? And then it comes to audio. I always feel like audio is the sort of afterthought. It's like, oh yeah, we need to get a track for that, or we must make an audio ad, and it sort of becomes the last thing that you do at sort of 4:00 on a Friday afternoon. If you sort of did that stuff with intention throughout the entire process, the results would be amazing, because you would have that consistency of sound across everything.
Absolutely. And I think as well, perhaps one reason why it does get left a little to the wayside and comes only as an afterthought is because audio is invisible. It's really hard to sell it into a client on a mood board or on a storyboard. Clients can be really literal, right? And they sometimes don't know what they want, which is absolutely fair enough. That's where we come in. But it's really subjective as well, audio. Yep. And that is...
Especially music.
And that's just a bit more daunting for people. So sometimes they just go, eek, sonic branding, is it all a bit too hard? But it's not. And, every brand needs to understand that no matter how big or small the project or the budget, sonic branding is such an incredible solution for everyone. Not every single brand has to be big menu log with celebrities. I once did a jingle. I sang for the Mingara RSL Club on the Central Coast, and oh my God, was it awesome. Like it's just a little effective radio ad in that local town, and it's works.
I think that's the key. I think we often think about it is that, oh, we're not McDonald's, we're not Netflix, we're not these big brands, we're not Bunnings. How would it work for us? We've done sonic branding for so many different types of industry and so many different types of brands, and like you said, it could be a smaller company in a localized town, or it could be a big national campaign.
And you think about jingles that are super memorable, particularly on radio, and you do think of Frank Walker from National Tiles or Winston with a Y. They're not all the big multinational behemoths.
No,
totally. Yeah. And I think I think the beauty of someone like Frank Walker is that it's just a bit different. Actually, it's like the other thing as well. It's not at the end of the ad; it's at the start, which is actually even better. I have this thing in my head about how brands should be using sonic branding, in different ways, not just at the end of their ads. If you think about YouTube for an example, if you're an advertiser advertising on YouTube, you should be putting your sonic branding at the start before the skip. No point of putting it at the end. Put it at the start, so you can at least, before anyone skips the ad, you could land a sonic identity for your brand. Things like that, just rethinking it and how the channels work differently to what TV would, for example, or radio.
That's super interesting. I have to ask you, Laura-Leigh, before I ask my final question of both of you, are there any more jingles that you have sung?
Oh gosh.
I feel like I need a resume of jingle more. Singing. Yeah.
We need one more. Oh dear. What could it be? I mean, there are some of the platforms in the UK where I did sing the Menulog jingle with the other incredible singers, Tony Robinson and James Thompson. But let me think. Oh, I was once in a Sheridan ad, Sheridan Sheets, a Christmas campaign, and I somehow got roped into being the visual talent as well as the singing talent. And they put cardboard cutouts of me in all the Sheridan Christmas stores. And my friends were like, where can I get one of these? Where can I get it now? It was super embarrassing, but it was really, really fun.
Oh, I love that so much.
And this is why I absolutely adore my job, because I'm, singing is my passion. I did it full time before I moved into audio post-production and have loved it for so many years. I've traveled the world with it. And now I can use that creative musical side of my brain and the production side of my brain to, bring this service to clients. It's awesome.
And be the voice and face of Sheridan. Last question. I'll start with you, Laura-Leigh, and then ask Aaron. Favorite jingle or piece of sonic branding? Tough question, I know.
Oh, favorite. You go first, Darren.
I don't know if I've got a favourite one. I'm not sure. I think the McDonald's one is great. It's really obvious to say that. The reason why the McDonald's one I love is because it's remixed in so many different ways. It's remixed culturally. It's remixed regionally. It's remixed for different occasions. They did an orchestra version for the Queen's Jubilee. It's so versatile and it shows up everywhere and it's just really clean and clever and I just think it's great. Aside from that, I don't know if I've got another one. Maybe the Netflix one as well, just because the story behind the Netflix one, which apparently is a wedding ring banging on the table, and it's also apparently has a connection to House of Cards. When Kevin Spacey bangs the desk, the didum when he bangs the desk is the Netflix logo.
That's interesting.
Because it was the first Netflix original. And that's where the Sonic came from, apparently. There's some connection there. So, but I think maybe Netflix had distanced themselves from that for obvious reasons. But
Clever. Have you got one?
There are some bits of Sonic branding I love just at the start of films as well. Like the big lion roar MGM, or of course the classic Disney. Again, they've transcended through time. They have such amazing longevity, and they're still so iconic today that it's, very, you got to respect something like that, for sure.
I feel like the HBO one was like an accident, right?
Yeah.
Like someone just lent on a fader or something and it was just, you had the white noise and that was it. I feel like that's quite clever, that one, but also just really iconic because it's so different.
Yeah. I'll ask you, Laura-Leigh, what's one thing you wish marketers knew or remembered more or protected when it comes to audio?
I think what would be amazing is marketers protected their sonic consistency just as fiercely as they protected the logo and the color palette that we've been talking about. It's just such an when you get briefed on an audio brief and they're reinventing what's happened in the previous campaign, it always just is so mind-boggling to me. I think distinctiveness in the brand sound comes from repetition, not from reinvention. And these incredible brands like McDonald's, Menulog, Bunnings, because they're treating this audio like their brand DNA, they're not treating it like a garnish on the campaign. It's so intrinsic to what they're doing in their strategy that we always say at Studiotonic to our clients, please involve us as early as possible in the process, because you'll undoubtedly get the best creative result and cohesive result.
And on that note, thanks both for joining us.
Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
I'm joined by Strat Agency's creative director, Kimberley Flanagan. Kimberley is helping shape one of Australia's biggest and most recognisable brands, Chemist Warehouse. Kimberley, welcome to Herd Mentality.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
I'm going to start, obviously, with the Chemist Warehouse jingle, which is so iconic.
Chemist Warehouse, in the middle of our street.
The version of Our House, that song, has essentially branded a cultural artifact that already existed and that people already loved. How important is the jingle to influencing the creative idea?
Oh, yeah, the jingle is very important. It was a mandatory. In fact, I feel like when we got the brief for this new brand campaign, we were told very strictly that the music is not a reinvention, it is an evolution. Obviously, the jingle is something that Chemist Warehouse started in 2014 with their brand campaign when they bought the rights to the Madness track, Our House. So, of course, that track has lived and breathed over the last 10 years. And, that jingle we've heard in various iterations over the last 10 years. So it is unmistakably Chemist Warehouse. So that is definitely something that we were told to handle with care. And, when we were working on this new brand campaign, we definitely wanted to keep the flavor and the familiarity that the jingle brings to the minds of consumers. But obviously we wanted to, make it a bit more modern and kind of just, give it a fresher energy so that we could just take it into the years to come. So it would have more longevity, I suppose.
And it's not just the jingle, particularly in the TV spots. I watched the suite of spots and the whole soundscape is really important. There's the sharp sound of tennis balls, there's yells at a netball game, there's a barbecue sizzling, bug spray can rattling, and the whistle, which I'll get to in just a little bit.
Chemist Warehouse in the middle of our street.
How did you think about that full soundscape as complementing but not overpowering the jingle?
Obviously, you've watched the ads, and you know that there's no real voiceover in the ads. It kind of is just the Chemist Warehouse track and the jingle that's powering the visuals and powering the concept. And so, we knew that sound was a really important part of this whole campaign. So I suppose, once we had to kind of do it simultaneously. We put once the visuals came to life, we definitely needed sound to propel it, and sound design was a very important aspect as well. Like, especially with our camping scenario, where we kind of see that moment where the family is struggling because they're swarmed by mosquitoes, and then you cut to our dad who picks up can of empty mosquito repellent. But that sound of the can rattling is so important for the storytelling, because in that quick moment you need to tell the audience that, oops, it's empty, and that's why we had to, that's why the whole family basically calls for Chemist Warehouse to come help them. So I guess, from the jingle to the sound design, every little part of that really helped to cement the creative.
And then if I drill down on the whistle, it's described as a playful SOS, which I love that wording. And it marks that a challenge has been encountered, and then we cut to someone in Chemist Warehouse offering a solution. Is the hope that the whistle also becomes synonymous with Chemist Warehouse?
Well, yes. I mean, I feel like the whistle has come a long way. It started out, it's in the brand track as just a background score. And over the last 10 years, that whistle has become synonymous with Chemist Warehouse. The minute you hear that whistle, it's a Chemist Warehouse ad. And so that whistle today stands for so many things. It stands for savings, great offers, discounts, basically solutions to everyday life and everyday needs. So we thought, what if we took it further? What if that whistle wasn't just a background element, but a signal for help? And like you said, a playful SOS for when life's little messes happen. So that's where the idea really clicked for us. And if we felt like, that's we wanted to build our idea around that moment. So yes, the whistle now basically stands for so much more than just this background element. And the other thing we also wanted to do was create audio assets that would live beyond this campaign. So by putting the whistle front and center and refreshing the music in a more modern way, we've built something that feels current, but also gives the brand that sort of sonic longevity.
Final question, and one that I'm ending every episode with. Favorite jingle or piece of sonic branding other than Chemist Warehouses?
Oh, well, the one that I can't get out of my head at the moment is the new Didi campaign, the float. I mean, it's just beautifully bizarre and I love it. And it's definitely something that has not left my brain. And I may have watched it like maybe a month and a half ago, and it still plays in my head.
Proves that distinctiveness works, right? If something's attention grabbing and different for the category, it cuts through.
Absolutely, yes.
On that note, thank you so much for joining us, Kimberley.
It was a pleasure. I'm so glad to be able to chat with you about this. It was really fun.
If you're a brand looking to connect with Australians, There's no better place than Aussie radio and audio. It reaches more than 15 million people every week and truly is where brands are heard. Head to cra.au to get started. See you next time.